HTMX. I've been excited to dive into this one. It's interesting to me because the idea that I could use just HTML to build a modern user experience on the web, that sounds exciting. One of the challenges with technology in our modern world is that it does have a barrier to entry. If you want to become a software engineer or developer that build applications on the web or for mobile, you have to have this extra set of knowledge. However, if we lower that entry level, then it becomes a lot more accessible to everyone. And I see that HTMX is that a way forward to allow us to provide that capability. Just jumping in here real quick, HTMX gives us access to a lot of things that we would normally have to deal with JavaScript and CSS directly on. We get AJAX, which is HTTP calls and web access, CSS transitions, web sockets, and server-sent events directly in HTML. This allows you to build modern user interfaces with the simplicity and power of just the hypertext itself. What's great here is I see they provide us a quick little example of a button. We can see that there's an attribute here of HX hyphen. With the HTMX library, it's going to interpret this as calling this API endpoint and then taking the result of that value that's returned and then supplying it to the user interface directly. They even show when a user clicks this button, it issues an AJAX request to clicked and replaces the entire button with HTML response. That's what the outer HTML is. It says the entire bit here. You could also have it replace just the click me by saying inner HTML. I'm pretty sure HTMX is really powerful. With the ability to use just HTML, we can build a full modern user experience. And let's dive in, let's give it a try. I want to see what this is like firsthand. Taking a quick look here, that I do see that it is a JavaScript library that you do have to import. One of the things, it's HTMX, it sounds so foundational. It's just a powerful capability that I thought maybe it was built into the browser, and it turns out this is a library that you do need to import. Taking a dive in here, it is a small library for about 14,000 kilobytes of minified and gzipped. Well, it's okay. That is quite a bit of JavaScript for a library, but if you compare it to React, it's significantly smaller. In general, browsers these days are very capable at handling the most modern user experiences with minimal JavaScript need. You can build the user experience, the user interface, using just HTML and CSS. With HTMX, it does bridge a bit into that side of things, and it extends some of the capabilities that you wouldn't normally be able to get with just HTML alone. The big one is specifically interacting with APIs and data on maybe a server or a serverless system. The motivation I see here that's listed, it describes that why only anchor tags and form tags be able to make HTTP calls from HTML directly. That's kind of exciting. Does that mean that every kind of HTML element, it looks like, can make an HTTP request using HTMX? Ooh, and we can add extra trigger. Okay. All right, well, we can have a click and submit trigger to invoke HTTP request. It looks like, I suppose we could add others, like maybe an on hover. Every time you hover, it's going to make an HTTP call somewhere. And it looks like we get more than just get and post methods. They link here to a bunch of methods. So there's the get, the head, which only grabs none of the content of the request, just the HTTP headers. The post, which is usually signifying state change on the server side. Put is typically used in a RESTful fashion that replaces the entirety of an existing or non-existing object. Delete will delete the resource. I like that one because it's obvious what's going on there. There's also this connect, which I've not personally used or seen firsthand on a regular basis, just kind of walking through what it mentions here. It says starting a two-way communication, so my initial thinking is, a secure WebSocket. Ooh, there's a trace option. Method performs message loopback tests along with the path and the target source. That is pretty nifty. Didn't know that. Never needed that one before. Options method, usually related to accessible resources from the target, potentially like security restrictions or other kinds of things where, hey, you can't touch that over there, but you can use these things, that kind of situation. And the patch, which is a modification of the server resource. Kind of like comparing that to a put, where a put will replace the entire object. You can say maybe update just the first name of a user, for example, with a patch. What's great is they provide a lot of examples here, and probably the most important one is the initial click the edit, the ability to edit a form and have it updated on the page directly, and also issue API calls to the server. So here's the example. What I like about this is it's really straightforward and simple. I can understand how that looks and works. It's clean and it's minimal. We can see that this is just displaying a user record entered Joe, and we want to be able to edit Joe based on the details of their name and email. So here's our API call endpoint where we're going to be editing the data. And there's a nice button here. Super clean. I like this. It's pretty straightforward. And so once we click the button, it's going to turn this. We would never have to write any of this, but it's going to turn this into an HTML form that automatically looks like this. It is interesting how it does choose the name of the input. This is critical because this is what the server is going to see. It looks like it converts this from the label into the name input here. Same for last name, and email is pretty straightforward. Oh, how? Okay, so it looks like here's the initial label. So it takes this, and then it will probably camel case all the label names. All right, that makes sense. Where did this address come from? I don't know. They have a demo on the page. Oh, okay, so maybe it's just a typo in their example. Let's check out the demo. So we see here, I'm gonna look under the hood really quick. Okay, here's their canonical example. We have here on the screen the original HTML, which is very simple div and label statements. And then as soon as we click the edit button, the HTMX is gonna take over, and we're gonna see all of this change. So I click on that, and we see it generated a form automatically for us. Oh, it gave a nice little submit button and a cancel button too. So I can change this to Steven. Here we go. I gave it my name, and then we'll say Steven PubNub. And then I click submit, and then we can see that it updates this all on the page, but it also made an HTTP call to the server backend. I'm pretty sure. Let's see if it actually did. Okay, well, I'm looking here. I don't see any. Let's try this here. Yeah, I'm not seeing any HTML call or HTTP requests. Probably because it's just a demo and there's no need to do it in a demo, I guess. But this is really powerful. So this allows you to interact with APIs on the web, and you can provide just HTML and create a complete edit form directly. And this provides the modern web experience where you don't have to do an entire page reload when you're submitting a form. HTMX is a powerful JavaScript framework that turns your developer experience into just having to deal with HTML directly, and you won't have to deal with JavaScript. I really like this because this helps a lot in making just a lot of the common patterns taken care of for you automatically. Oh, this is neat. Check this out. HTMX was something before it became HTMX. It was intercooler. All right, intercooler JS. It says intercooler 2.0 is actually HTMX 1.0, and that is nice. It'll continue to support the 1.0 forever. This is pretty powerful. You can see the minimalism here, which is really important because every line of code that you create becomes tech debt, right? That becomes, you own that code. It becomes your debt, which means that in order to maintain that functionality going forward, you will have to ensure that that works. It's something that you depend on, and having less code and fewer characters means lower cost overall. With the simplicity of just having to deal with HTML directly, that means that you can have a larger population of folks who would be able to contribute to the code base. Because HTML is a lot more simple than dealing with JavaScript directly. And I was clicking the demo here. You can see, oh, okay, it took me. All right, so we're done checking out the 1.0. Let's check out the 2.0. We're gonna try out the 2.0 here. Here we go. All right, we're gonna give it a try. We're gonna try out this directly, and we're gonna run it into our terminal. We're gonna bring up our code editor. All right, to make this simple, we're gonna paste this into our HTML file. Got HTML. It's just a regular HTML file. It's not like a new fun extension, which, you know, could have been .htmx, but just .html or whatever. We'll open up our text editor. Very simple. Okay, so we have our library here at the top, and then we've got our button, which has an attribute here that says AJAX-post, supposed to invoke an API call using the same domain name, it looks like, to /clicked. And then whatever's returned from there will be replacing the entire button. We'll open up here the example, and then let's make sure it looks all, oh, yep, this is our code from our file. Looks good. And then if we click the button, it should do something. Let's see what it does. Okay, we clicked it. Oh, it worked. Okay. This is what we wanted to see. It did make the HTTP call, and we can see here that, you know, since I'm running it just from a file, file /clicked isn't going to do anything because there's nothing there to have happen. Also, it's a security concern. So it failed, but the good part is that it actually invoked the API call. I just clicked on the button and I didn't have to do anything special. Import the HTMX library directly. All right, let's see if we can see what it looks like if we do start a web server, a simple web server that's gonna give us a file server here, and then we open that in our browser really quick. We'll click the click me and see what happens this time. Okay, perfect. All right, this is much better. All right, so it did do a post, and it posted it against my endpoint, and since of course it's not, you know, an actual API server, it's just a file server, it's going to post to something that it can't post to. So it's still going to give it an error, but the good part is it's working as intended. So this is really straightforward. As long as you have a web server backend that can deal with the API calls on the front end, this is exactly what you need. HTMX lets us achieve a lot of things that we would normally have to use JavaScript for directly. Now with HTMX, we can use just HTML and some HTML attributes, and this will take care of the majority of all the functionality that we need and expect in a modern UI. We're going to walk through some of the examples that they provide here. Let's check it out. They have a click to edit, which is a simple button that simply posts data to a server, a bulk update, which lets you update multiple records all at once, and a click to load, which will load in dynamic data that isn't included already in the page. This is a good one. I'm actually interested in checking that one out. Let's dive into click to load first. I'm curious about this. All right, so we've got all our HTML here right on the screen. It says an example shows an implemented click to load on the next page and a table of data. So if you have a lot of data, you don't want to load the client with all of the data. You just want like the initial part of the data, and then you can start incrementally adding more based on the user's requirement. The user can click the load more agents button. This button is very detailed. There's a lot to it. Ooh, a get page 2. Well, I wonder if this auto increments. Replace me. Okay, so here's the replace me ID, and it will replace the entire thing. I see. Okay. All right, this just looks like a snippet here of the important parts. Where I'm looking at the demo does see like we have more details. Okay. So here's the initial data. Here's the initial table itself. We can see table, the header of the table, which we know is going to be the name, email, and ID, and then the data for the table, which are the rows. All right, and they give us a load more agents button. Let's check it out. I'm going to click it. Oh, and it worked. It loaded more agents. / contacts with the parameter of page equals 2, and it gave us more data. 21, 22, 23. Okay. And if we click it again, oh, it gave us more data. And what's interesting is it just continuously appends it over here. And I was assuming that it was going to overwrite it, but it actually is appending it to the screen. Interesting. Can we just keep clicking this forever? I bet you we can. All right, here's another common one that I like to see often is a lazy loading. You've got a web application that might need to fetch some data depending on the user's need. And a lazy loading is a good way to do that. Let's dive in. All right, so here's our lazy load demo. We have, it looks like it's going to be an image. So we're loading the page here. We see the image loading, and then it fades in nice and pretty. That's pretty straightforward. So it's not clear if I have to provide the CSS myself, though kind of, does it look like I need to? No, it doesn't, based on what they're showing here. Diving into the HTML really quick, and I just ran into their fake server side. Okay. This is why I can, that makes a lot of sense now. Looks like this allows us to override some of the interactions on the HTMX capabilities. All right, based on what I'm looking at here really quick is that I do see that the CSS was included in outside of HTMX, sort of just like a little extra sprinkle of integration that shows you how you integrate CSS and HTMX directly. Pretty cool. I'm most certain in this case that we definitely have to hand write our own CSS to provide this kind of experience where the image will sort of fade in like it does right there. And it doesn't seem like that's something that's just natively included with HTMX, so it's just a little bit of extra. It's nice from a perspective to let us know how do we integrate CSS for custom experiences like this. Although on the other side, it would have been nice if maybe that's just like a standard default that the library includes. HTMX lets us write all of our application logic in HTML directly without having to use JavaScript. One of the great things in their documentations, they provide a lot of UI examples. Let's go through a few of these examples. Let's check out the row edit, the editing row. The example shows us how to implement editable rows. So here's the table, the normal HTML that we'd usually write. And then we have a couple of attributes here that indicate how HTMX is supposed to interact with the HTML and the user's input, usually when they click on something, right? Okay, taking a look here and reading this HX target closest TR, which is going to match this here, I believe. It's going to provide this sort of end result. You don't have to write this. This is something that the HTMX library provides for you automatically. I am not familiar with this syntax here. What is this? What are they doing? If the result... This must be pseudocode, I assume? Oh, that is not pseudocode. It's something called hyperscript, which is this. Enhance HTML with concise DOM, event, and async features, which makes writing interactive HTML a joy. I don't know. I mean, it is a little more simple, and I can see that for sure. It is not. All right, let's try it. We're going to press and hold. Oh, pretty. Okay. I mean, this kind of stuff can be done with CSS if you're just trying to update the UI. You don't really need any of this. CSS and HTML. Vanilla without any libraries can basically do that right there. I'm typically a minimalist, so the less dependencies, the better. So this is our edit button here. When we click on that edit button, it's going to take us to this. The HTMX library is going to provide us with this HTML directly. This is something that we have to write. This is something that HTMX provides for us automatically. Ooh, neat. It even includes a cancel button. And then, of course, the save button. When you click the edit, you want to be able to save any of the changes you've made. Now, here's a quick demo. We've got our table that we saw in the HTML before. Now we got this edit button. We're going to click that. Then we can, let's change John to myself and put my email in there and click save. Oh, fantastic. So here's what the server API calls would look like. We're doing a put, which replaces the entire contact row there with name Steven, email Steven, and we get back a response from the server, the HTML that we need to put in the place. It replaces the entire row. All right, let's take a look at some more examples here. See, there's also an animations demo. Let's check it out. It says HTMX is designed to allow us to use CSS transitions and to add smooth animations and transitions to our web page using just CSS and HTML. I mean, you only need this part to be able to make that happen. You don't need the HTMX itself. Though it is important to note that a lot of the HTMX capabilities are not going to be providing you much of anything in regards of CSS or design of the UI. So it is good that they have this demo here because it is giving us the scope of where HTMX is at. It's only going to be providing that foundational communication technology that allows you to edit and manipulate data in a web app without you having to write any JavaScript. However, you do have to write some CSS if you want things to look pretty. So we've got a nice smooth transition here. It's a class named smooth, transition everything. Oh, okay. So whatever's changed, it'll transition to. So if we change the background or the color or the opacity, it will animate for 1 second. Oh, this is neat. All right, so we have a trigger event that says trigger every 1 second. That's kind of neat. So we can have, it's gonna do something every second. Let's see. What exactly is it going to do here? Is it really going to make a web call every second? The div will pull every second and get replaced with the new content, which changes the color of the style. So it looks like we started with red and it's going to go to blue. Ooh, and here we go. Here's the demo. So the color swap demo. We see what that looks like. I'm just kind of curious to see what that looks like underneath. Okay, we see it here animating. It's being triggered every second. The smooth is going to swap between, oh, it's doing more than just one color. Yeah, I was wondering if it, because see, it's going orange, red, blue, green. All right, we're seeing like a whole bunch of different colors, more than was mentioned in above here, but we are seeing it transition. All right, so we've got a fade out on swap demo. So, oh, a simple, easy delete button. So we have our CSS here that describes opacity to ease opacity for 1 second. HX swap, outer HTML swap 1 second. Ooh, interesting. A neat little, a new thing we haven't seen yet with HTMX. So we'll click the demo, delete me, and ooh, it disappears. When building UI, it is really nice to be able to have sort of those clean transitions that improve that user experience, because you can, it allows you to see that you've made an effect. The user will understand that when they've interacted with the page, it's a confirmation when something is changing more gradually rather than an instantaneous change. So it's kind of a nice little addition there. So we have another demo here, fade in on addition. In this case, we see we're building on the last example where we can fade in the new content using HTMX added. Okay, so there's, it looks like there's a class here that it's going to be looking at, class during the settling process. Ooh, settling phase. Okay. And it says here from the settling perspective that we can also write CSS transitions against the target rather than the new content using the HTMX settling class. Let's try it out. Let's click the button. All right, we clicked the button and it ooh, okay. Disappeared and came back. Does it do it again? It sure does. It comes back. Okay, so very straightforward, some simple CSS here. Looks like we've got some special class names that HTMX is expecting to be able to make an improvement on that user experience. It also looks like, here's another example with animations, that there's a class tools extension. It's like interesting animations can be created using the class tools extension. Just check that out really quick here. Ah, it's an extra library. You gotta grab that and import it as well. Okay, and it gives us the, oh, we get this new classes and class. It allows us to specify a little more cleanly in interesting ways what that's going to look like based on the interactivity. Okay, So that helps. That's kind of a nice capability. It's important because this allows us to change the UI as it's being interacted with. It gives us a little bit more control. I see. Okay, so it's going to toggle the class itself. So we've got a subclass here of toggle on the faded, which is going to be defined here. Very interesting. Okay, so we've got our top level class here, and it's going to toggle in the dot faded parts, which gives us this neat animation effect. All right, and then we have a nice final example here in the animation side of using a view transportation API? Transitions API. All right, here. View transitions API is an experimental technology in MDM documentations. The idea is that we can, okay, so it allows us to easily create animated transitions between different DOM states. So as we manipulate the DOM, and that's what HTMX is doing on the most part, it can provide an animation of before it's modified. It can animate that unmodified state and then bring in the modified state. So rather than just an immediate flip, it can do some nifty animation. That seems pretty nifty. So we have here defined our keyframes and the name of the animation class itself. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 of those. And then, look at this. Okay, so this is kind of neat. All right, so this is not an HTMX thing itself directly. It's mostly involved with CSS and how HTML is going to be modified. It's neat to show that this example here, because I'm not familiar with this one. It is kind of neat. All right, so we've got view transition old, which is the slide it, which is defined here. And then we've got our HTML here, which has the class slide it. And then essentially anything that happens inside of here will follow these animation rules. That's pretty neat. I like that. That's pretty powerful. Essentially, we don't need to do any toggling of classes in JavaScript or any special HTMX implementation. We simply just say, here's the class, and then anything that changes in here follow these rules for animation. That's really powerful. Let's try it out. All right, so we've got the entire div here, which is going to be these two things, initial content and a button. I click it, and then, whoa, check it out. There's the new content. And we click restore, and then boom, it comes back to the way it was. All right, so we can keep clicking this, and it will flip back and forth between the two. That's really cool. That's neat, because usually in order to provide an effect like that, you would have to be toggling classes and have a state where before any of the content is replaced, you'd have to add like maybe a timer, animate out, and then replace the content and then animate in, which is quite a bit of extra work. This is pretty powerful. So just taking a quick review what we had in the animation section here, I was pretty satisfied with seeing that for the most part we're leveraging native browser capabilities and not so much the HTMX library itself. It is showing how HTMX will interact with the different classes and animations. It is fairly lightweight, which is nice. I like that lightweightedness. Overall, I'd say HTMX is pretty powerful in its capabilities. That makes it really straightforward and easy for us to use HTML directly rather than having to jump into JavaScript. There was no examples that we ran into where we had to actually use JavaScript, which was the whole point of HTMX, is just using HTML directly and getting that interactive modern user experience. So I would definitely say it achieved the goal from that perspective. It is a bit large amount of JavaScript to be able to handle that when the majority of the browsers and capabilities from a modern UI perspective can be done with just HTML and CSS directly itself. The interactive part where you're making API calls, yes, you will need JavaScript for that if you're not using HTMX directly. However, the majority of the user experience is still possible with HTML and CSS exclusively without any libraries whatsoever. And I was kind of expecting that HTMX would bring with it some of that visual UI experience because that's a large part of it. However, you still have to jump into CSS to make that work. So the strong part for HTMX in this case is going to be its foundation of being able to make API calls, change that data on the UI using modern techniques where you don't have to reload the entire page. And this is great from a fantastic user experience, and it's basically what you expect these days on the web and in any application.